They didn't just laugh. They stopped the race. The officials walked straight toward him before the engine even cooled from the drive-in. "Sir, this track is for real machines." One of them tapped the side of his tractor. The metal sounded hollow, not scrap. The crowd liked that line. A few people clapped. Someone shouted, "Send it back to the junkyard." He didn't react, didn't argue, didn't explain. He just sat there, hands resting lightly on a steering wheel that had more cracks than paint, boots planted steady on pedals worn smooth by decades. The tractor wasn't shiny. It wasn't loud. It wasn't new. It was old steel, faded red, rust at the edges. A machine that looked like it had already lived 3 lifetimes. And next to it, brand new John Deere machines, polished green, chrome flashing in the sun, engines rumbling like thunder, just waiting to explode down the track. The announcer lowered his microphone slightly. "You sure you're in the right place, sir?" More laughter. The old farmer finally looked up, not angry, not embarrassed. Calm, the kind of calm that doesn't need approval. "I paid the entry," he said. The official sighed. "It's not about the money. It's about the machine." That line hit harder, because everyone there believed it. You don't bring a relic to a modern pull. You don't line up scrap next to powerhouses. You don't challenge machines that cost more than your entire farm. But he didn't move. The crowd started getting restless. They wanted the race to start. They wanted speed, noise, smoke, not this quiet old man sitting on what looked like a museum piece. One of the younger drivers leaned over from his cab. "You'll stall before the first marker." Another added, "Hope you brought a tow rope." Laughter again. The official stepped closer. "Last chance. We can refund your entry fee." The old farmer finally turned the key. The engine coughed. Once, twice. The crowd grinned. A third crank. Then it caught. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. A deep, heavy rhythm. Not fast, not aggressive, confident. The sound was different from the others. Less scream, more weight. Some people stopped laughing. Just for a second, the official stepped back instinctively. The old farmer adjusted the throttle slightly. The tractor didn't shake. It didn't sputter. It settled, like it had been waiting for this. The announcer looked at the officials. They looked at the crowd. The crowd looked unsure, because suddenly it didn't look like scrap. It looked patient. "Fine," the official muttered. "You get one run." The old farmer nodded once. No smile, no celebration, just focus, as he rolled slowly toward the starting line. A few people were still laughing, but fewer than before, and the ones who weren't laughing were listening, because something about that engine didn't sound weak. It sounded ready. And the race hadn't even started yet. The chain dropped behind him, heavy steel links dragging across dirt. The sled operator locked in place. "Track is hot," the announcer shouted. The younger drivers leaned forward inside their shiny cabs. They were smiling again, because now it would happen. Now the scrap would stall. Now the joke would finish itself. The old farmer didn't look at them. He didn't look at the crowd either. He looked straight down the track. 300 feet of packed dirt, flags on both sides, distance markers every 50 feet. The first marker was where weak machines died. The second was where average ones slowed. Past 200 feet, that's where only real power survived. The green tractors had already set the tone earlier. 230 feet, 240. One hit 260, and the crowd exploded. That was a number to beat. The official raised a green flag. For 1 second, everything went silent. Then it dropped. The old tractor moved. Not violently, not aggressively. Just moved. Slow roll. The sled jerked tight. Dirt kicked up behind the tires. The engine deepened, not screaming, growing heavier. The first 20 feet looked weak. The crowd relaxed. "Here it comes," someone muttered. 30 feet. The front tires dipped slightly. 40 feet. The sled started biting into the dirt. Now the real pull began. Most machines panic here. They spin. They bounce. They lose grip. His didn't. He adjusted the throttle slightly. Not full power. Measured power. The rear tires compressed into the track. The tractor leaned forward. 50 feet. 60. 70. The laughter faded. At 100 feet, the announcer's voice changed. "Well, he's still moving." The young driver who mocked him earlier stopped smiling. The engine note didn't break, didn't choke. It held. A steady rhythm. 150. Dust cloud behind him now. The sled digging deeper. Weight transferring forward. This is where machines quit. This is where engines overheat. This is where cheap builds show their flaws. The old tractor kept crawling. 200 feet. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were standing. 220. The John Deere drivers looked at each other. 230. Now it was serious. The announcer was shouting. "He's matching the leaders." 240. The sled looked like it weighed twice as much now. The front end lifted slightly. The engine growled. For a second, it sounded like it might stall. Gasped in the crowd. The old farmer didn't panic. He leaned forward, adjusted again. Not force. Control. 250. 260. Now the crowd exploded, because he had passed the best run of the day. 270. The sled finally locked. The tractor stopped. Engine still running. Distance board flashed. 273 feet. Silence. Then chaos. The crowd roared. Not laughing now. Roaring. The officials looked stunned. The young driver who told him to bring a tow rope slowly removed his gloves. The old farmer eased the throttle down, turned the engine off, and just sat there, not celebrating, not waving, just breathing, because he knew something they didn't. That wasn't the fastest machine on the track. It wasn't the newest. It wasn't the loudest, but it was built differently. And the race wasn't over yet. The applause didn't stop. But something else changed. The air. It wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't a sideshow. It was a threat. The announcer tried to recover. "Well, folks, looks like scrap metal still moves." Nervous laughter. But nobody was laughing the same way. Because 273 feet wasn't luck. It was the lead. The scoreboard updated. His name, Earl Whitaker. Above every polished machine on the track. The young driver in the bright green tractor stepped down from his cab. He walked toward the officials. "That sled wasn't set right," he said loudly. "No way that antique pulls that far." A few nods from his crew. The officials looked uncomfortable. One of them turned toward Earl. "Sir, we're going to reset the sled. Just to be fair." Fair. Now they wanted fair. Earl nodded once. "Set it however you want." No anger. No argument. That bothered them more. The sled operator adjusted the weight. More forward. More resistance. Harder pull. The kind that breaks transmissions. The kind that makes engines beg for mercy. The green tractor lined up first. Full throttle. Crowd screaming. It launched hard. Aggressive. Confident. 100 feet fast. 150 still strong. 200 struggling. 220 tires spinning. 235. Dead stop. Engine whining. Not enough. The crowd reacted, but it wasn't explosive, because the number to beat was still 273. Another modern machine tried. 240. Then 251. Still short. The announcer's voice tightened. And now Earl Whitaker returned for his second poll. Some cheers. Some silence. The same officials who told him to leave earlier were now watching carefully. No one asked him to step aside. No one laughed, but they were hoping. Hoping the first run was a fluke. Hoping the second would expose him. The chain locked in. The sled heavier now. The track rougher. Dirt torn up from earlier pulls. Harder surface. Less grip. The green flag lifted. Dropped. The old tractor moved again. Slower this time. Heavier resistance immediately. 30 feet grinding. 50 feet deeper growl. The front end bounced once. Gasps. Earl didn't push harder. He adjusted. Tiny throttle correction. Weight shift. The rear tires found something in the dirt. 100 feet. 150. Now the engine was screaming. Not panicked. Working. 200 feet. The sled clawed like an anchor. 220. The crowd was standing again. 240. Now, even the officials were staring at the measurement line. 255. The engine coughed once. A sharp crack in the sound. The young driver smirked. This is it. 260. 270. The tractor slowed, grinding forward inch by inch. Every vibration visible. Every strain audible. 273. Matched. Dead even. The crowd held its breath. 274. He passed his own mark. 278. The sled locked hard. The tractor stopped. Engine still alive. Scoreboard flashed. 278 feet. 5 feet further. On a harder setup. On a rougher track. With more weight. No excuses now. Silence. Then the loudest roar of the day. Not laughter. Respect. The young driver who mocked him earlier removed his cap. Slowly, one of the officials stepped forward. Same man who had walked toward him before the race. His tone was different now. Sir, what's in that tractor? Earl looked at him, wiped grease from his hands. Work, he said. That was all. He climbed down. The crowd parted. No one blocking his way this time. No one pointing. No one clapping sarcastically. Just watching. Because the race wasn't about speed anymore. It was about pride. And pride had just shifted. But one last competitor remained. And he wasn't smiling. There was one tractor left. The favorite. The champion from last year. A fully modified machine built for one purpose. To dominate. The driver stepped out slowly. Mid-30s. Confident. Professional. He had sponsors stitched across his jacket. His crew moved around the tractor like a pit team. He hadn't laughed earlier, but he hadn't defended Earl either. He walked toward Earl now. You've got torque, he said quietly. Old school torque. Earl nodded. Steel was thicker back then. The younger man studied him. You rebuilt it yourself? Every bolt. A pause. Good, the driver said. I'd rather lose to that than luck. He walked back to his machine. The crowd felt it too. This wasn't mockery anymore. This was a duel. The sled was reset again. Maximum weight forward. Track chewed up and uneven. The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. If he passes 278 feet, we have a new leader. The green tractor roared to life. Clean sound. Modern power. It launched hard. Explosive acceleration. 100 feet fast. 150 even faster. 200 feet. Strong. The crowd screaming now. 250. The machine wasn't slowing. 270. Now it started to strain. 275. Grinding. 278. Matched. 279. The sled bit down violently. The front end dropped. The tires clawed dirt into the sky. 282. Then it stopped. Scoreboard flashed. 282 feet. 4 feet ahead. The crowd erupted. The champion had done it. Earl watched quietly. No frustration. No anger. Just observation. The younger driver climbed down and walked straight to Earl. Held out his hand. That was the best pull I've seen in years. Earl shook it. You earned it. But then something unexpected happened. The official approached both of them. There's been a protest. The crowd murmured. A protest? The champion asked. The official nodded. Several competitors are questioning Earl's tractor classification. They're saying it shouldn't be allowed in stock class. The old murmurs came back. Scrap metal. Doesn't belong. Not real. The same voices. Different tone. The official continued. We need to inspect the engine before confirming placements. Earl nodded. Go ahead. They opened the hood. Crowd pressing closer. Phones out. Engines normally tell the truth quickly. Modified heads. Aftermarket fuel systems. Illegal adjustments. But what they saw wasn't illegal. It was older, heavier, original casting numbers, hand-machined adjustments, clean well work, but stock. The official leaned back. Everything checks out. Silence again. The protest died instantly. The announcer cleared his throat. Final standing, second place, 278 feet, Earl Whitaker. A pause. First place, 282 feet. Applause. But something fell off, because even the winner wasn't celebrating wildly. He walked back to Earl. You coming next year? Earl shrugged. If the tractor's still running. The younger driver smiled. Bring it. I'll build mine better. That was respect. Real respect. Not pity. Not sympathy. Challenge. Earl climbed back into his truck. He didn't stay for photos. Didn't stand for trophies. Didn't care about the check. He had come for one reason. To see if scrap metal could still compete. It had. And something else had happened. The laughter had died. Not because he won. Because he didn't quit. As he pulled out of the fairgrounds, two teenage boys stood near the exit fence. One of them pointed at the old tractor on the trailer. That's the one they called junk. The other nodded slowly. Yeah, and it almost won. Almost. But almost wasn't the story. The story was that it belonged. And that changed everything. Because the next morning, there were 3 calls waiting on Earl's landline. The first call came at 6:12 a.m. Earl was already awake. Coffee poured. Boots on. Morning quiet stretching across the fields. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Whitaker. A pause. Then a younger voice. Sir, this is Caleb Morgan. I was at the pool yesterday. Earl waited. I just wanted to ask, would you be willing to look at my tractor? Silence for a second. You trying to win? Earl asked. Or trying to learn? Another pause. Learn. Bring it by Saturday. Click. The second call came at 7:03. This one older. Recognizable. One of the men who had laughed loudest near the fence. Earl, this is Don Harris. Earl said nothing. I owe you an apology. Wind moved through the open window. Corn rustled in the distance. I shouldn't have said what I said. That tractor, it ain't junk. Earl took a sip of coffee. No, he said calmly. It ain't. Don cleared his throat. If you ever need anything, I don't. And Earl hung up. The third call came at 8:41. Unknown number. Professional tone. This is Martin from Prairie County Equipment. Earl recognized the name. Big dealership. New models. Shiny machines. We'd like to invite you down, the voice continued. Maybe do a feature. Talk about your tractor. Your story. Earl leaned back in his chair. And why would I do that? Well, there's interest. A lot of people are talking about yesterday. Of course they were. Because something rare had happened. A man with nothing to prove. Prove something anyway. I'm not interested in selling anything, Earl said. No, sir. We were thinking more about community engagement. That made him almost smile. Community. The same community that clapped when officials tried to remove him. I'll think about it. He hung up. By noon, there were 5 more calls. 2 from young farmers. 1 from a mechanic asking about his torque setup. one from the fair committee asking if he'd come back next year, and one message left on the machine from the champion. You made me better yesterday. Thank you. That one sat with him, because that was the point. Not winning, not proving, making the standard higher. Saturday came fast. Caleb arrived early, 19 years old, nervous, driving a tractor that looked newer than Earl's, but tired in a different way. They worked side by side in the shed. No cameras, no audience, just tools and questions. Why didn't you quit when they tried to stop you? Caleb asked at one point. Earl wiped grease from his hands. Because if you leave when they tell you to, they'll always think they were right. Caleb nodded slowly. That stayed with him. Word spread faster than Earl expected. By the next local poll, there were 4 older tractors registered, not restored showpieces, working machines, built in sheds, driven by men who used to stay quiet. The atmosphere changed. Less laughing, more watching, more listening. Even the officials handled things differently, because once you misjudge someone publicly, you think twice the next time. At the diner one morning, 2 regulars were talking near the counter. You see Whitaker's tractor last week? Yeah. Guess scrap ain't always scrap. Earl didn't look up from his plate, but he heard it. He always heard it. 3 months later, Prairie County Equipment hosted a classic pull night, invited older models, featured legacy machines, put Earl's tractor on the poster. He almost didn't go, didn't like attention, didn't need validation. But Caleb convinced him. You changed something, the kid said. You should see it. So he went, parked quietly in the back like always. But this time, no one laughed. People stepped aside. Kids pointed, not mockingly, but curiously. That's the one. The officials nodded respectfully. The champion walked over first. You ready? Earl adjusted his cap. Always. He didn't win that night either. Didn't need to, because now the track felt different. It wasn't about proving scrap could compete. It was about reminding everyone. That power doesn't always look new, and respect doesn't always arrive first. Sometimes it comes after the noise dies. As Earl loaded the tractor back onto the trailer, Caleb stood nearby. Think they'll laugh next year? The kid asked. Earl tightened the last chain. They might, he said calmly, but that's their mistake. And this time, the crowd clapped before the engine even started. Winter came early that year. The track sat empty. The banners were taken down. The noise faded, but the story didn't. At the feed store, men who once joked about junkyard metal now argued about torque ratios. At the repair shop, younger mechanics started asking older farmers questions they used to ignore. And at the county office, the officials quietly changed a rule. No tractor could be rejected based on age or appearance, only on safety. Nobody announced it publicly. They didn't need to. Everyone knew why. Earl Whitaker went back to what he'd always done. Morning chores, fence repairs, engine adjustments in a quiet shed. No interviews, no speeches, just work. But something had shifted. One afternoon, a truck pulled into his driveway. Clean, new, dealership logo on the door. A man stepped out. Young, polished boots, pressed shirt. He walked toward the shed carefully. Mr. Whitaker? That's me. I'm with Prairie County Equipment. We're launching a new line next spring. We'd like you to test one. Earl didn't answer. The young man continued. We think it would mean something if someone like you drove it first. Someone like you. That phrase used to mean something else. Used to mean outdated, small, insignificant. Now it meant something different. Trusted, respected. Earl wiped his hands on a rag. You selling power, he asked. Or reliability? The young man hesitated. Reliability. Then build it right. Don't need me to prove it. He turned back to his old machine. Conversation over. The young man stood there a moment longer, then nodded. He understood. A week later, Caleb showed up again, this time not for help, just to sit. They watched the sun drop behind the fields. You know, Caleb said quietly, when they stopped the race that day, I almost believed them. Earl looked at him. Believe what? That some machines don't belong. Earl tapped the hood of his tractor. Everything belongs somewhere, he said. You just have to know where. Spring returned, and with it, the next county pool. The crowd was bigger than ever, but quieter, not tense, not mocking, just waiting. When Earl rolled onto the track this time, no one laughed. No one clapped either. They simply watched, because respect doesn't need noise. The official walked over. Same man from last year, different expression. You ready, sir? Sir. Earl nodded. The flag rose. The engine roared. The sled dug deep. And the old tractor pulled steady. Not flashy. Not violent. Just relentless. When it stopped, it wasn't first. It wasn't last. It was enough. The crowd stood, not cheering wildly, just standing. Because sometimes the loudest applause is the silence that replaces laughter. As Earl drove off the track, Caleb jogged alongside. They don't laugh anymore, the kid said. Earl didn't slow down. They learned, he replied. What? Earl glanced once at the grandstand. That scrap is only scrap. If you don't understand it. He drove back toward the trailer, dust trailing behind. No spotlight, no announcement, just a man and a machine that refused to quit. And somewhere in that quiet exit was the real victory.